right, welcome back. We're going to talk about a philosopher today named Rene Descartes. You might have heard of him before. He's famous for this saying, I think, therefore I am. We're going to learn about that today. So, Rene Descartes has a plan. He has a plan to establish that we have knowledge of math and science and our observations and things like that, except that he also accepts the idea that in order to know something, it can't possibly be false. And so you'll remember that from the guaranteed, justified, true belief theory of knowledge that in order to know something, it has to be guaranteed to be true. And so Descartes accepts that idea, and yet he nonetheless wants to show that there are some things that are guaranteed to be true, that it's not possible that they're false. Um, so we're going to learn about his plan and talk about what he thinks we know and don't know. And we're going to focus on the reading for today. And if you haven't done it, you for sure should. It's the first two meditations that Descartes wrote. And there were six meditations total, but the first two are what we're going to focus on. He writes it like a diary, and it's actually, for philosophy, pretty gripping and well written. So you're going to want to read it, just because the style is readable, but also it's a really famous couple of chapters um, in philosophy. It's probably one of the more famous books in philosophy. So you should check it out. Ideas are interesting. I'm going to read some passages from the reading today, um, so you can kind of get a flavor for what he's trying to do, and then I'll explain the plan with some slides. But let's just let me just read you a little bit from um, his first meditation, and this is how things start out. Um, and I will say, I guess I'll give you a little background before I read it to you. Um, so Descartes was a well-respected philosopher for his time, and he wrote about all kinds of things, including math. Um, in geometry, he's probably at least as well known in geometry as he is in philosophy, because you've probably heard of the Cartesian coordinates, the x and y that you put on a graph that basically allows you to use math to sort of map out what's happening in the world. So he was a really original thinker about lots of different topics, and he was really well known. Personal stuff, I'll tell you, he liked to get up. He I guess he liked to work from bed. So he would like stay in bed next to the fire and stay warm and do his work. And then he would work, like, late morning, and then he would get his work done, and then he'd be good for the rest of the day. He'd relax. So he did enjoy his downtime. He took work very seriously, but he also would try to do it when he was in a comfortable place. Um, he got to be so famous that he was summoned by royalty from around Europe, um, so that he could teach them. And he was summoned. This is sadly how he died. He was summoned by Queen of Sweden, Queen Christina, to basically tutor her, and she liked to get up really early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and obviously she lives in this great big castle. So Descartes was basically, when you're summoned by a queen, you that's what you're doing. So he had to do it, he didn't want to do it, and he didn't want to have to get up early in the morning when it's cold and teach this queen. Apparently, they didn't even really get along all that well. Um, and so he was getting up early. He wasn't doing his usual thing where he was under the blankies and by the fire. And before too long, he caught pneumonia and died. So that's how he died. It's a pretty uh, sad ending. You know, he knew himself. Obviously, he knew that he needed to be warm and comfortable to think clearly, um, and deal with, you know, living in the early 1600s in France. But he ended up being summoned to Sweden, where it's even colder than that, and died shortly thereafter because he was cold and didn't have good access to what he's used to. Um, the meditations that he wrote are they're kind of like a diary, which makes it readable and interesting. So the first meditation is sort of like, you know, the first day of his plan, of his project. So let me read you how he starts out this day. Um, if I can find it, all right. Hang on just a moment. All right. So, first meditation, first paragraph. Some years ago, I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood. And just notice for a moment that, you know, he's noticing that now that he's a grown up, he's realized that when he was a kid, he used to think silly things. And so he goes on, by the highly doubtful nature of the whole edifice that I had subsequently based them on. So he's noticing that, like, I had all these silly ideas, and then I built more things that I thought I knew based on them. And so some years ago, he realized that it was necessary, he says, once in the course of my life, to demolish everything completely and start again right from the foundations if I wanted to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last. So, this is his plan. He wants to demolish all of his beliefs and start again from the foundations now that he's a grown up thinking rationally and clearly about things. He doesn't know what of his beliefs are true or false, because some of them are based on silliness from when he was a kid. He wants to start fresh. So imagine like a reset for a computer, right? You're just like getting rid of all of the things that are in the memory and you're starting fresh. Then he adds, but the task looked an enormous one. Obviously it is, to get rid of all your beliefs. And I began to wait until I should reach a mature enough age to ensure that no subsequent time of life would be more suitable for tackling such inquiries. This led me to put the project off for so long that I would now be to blame if by pondering over it any further I wasted the time still left for carrying it out. So today's his day. Today I have expressly rid my mind of all worries and arranged for myself a clear stretch of free time. So he's basically set himself up in front of the fire. He's warm, he's got the day in front of him. I'm here quite alone, and at last I will devote myself sincerely and without reservation to the general demolition of my opinions. So his plan is to demolish his opinions and try to figure out, what does he know? Because he doesn't trust the, his beliefs, because they're based on things when he was little, and a lot of that stuff was false. Oh my goodness. All right. So let me show you his plan here. So Descartes, we're going to call it his foundationalist plan. Remember how he's got this analogy that of a foundation. Think of like a foundation of a house. Um, so what he wants to do is he wants to get knowledge about ourselves and the world around us, math, science, by building from foundational beliefs that pass his method of doubt test. So he does have a method of doubt test where a belief passes that test means or equals by definition the truth of the belief cannot be doubted. Remember how he agrees with the GJTB idea that in order to know something, it can't possibly be mistaken. So, in order to know something, it can't be doubted. And so, what he's going to do in this first meditation is he's trying to like figure out what are the things that like don't pass the method of doubt test. And it ends up that there are quite a few things that do not pass the method of doubt test. So let me show you the things that don't pass, and then I'll explain this further. Um, so there's two types of beliefs that don't pass. One is what's called an a posteriori belief. And what that means is that it's justified by sense experience. So these are beliefs that are based on sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. Here in North Carolina, we often look up. I'm looking up today, and don't you know the sky is blue? Um, I'm using my eyes to tell me that. That belief, we're going to learn, does not pass the method of doubt test. What about beliefs justified by reason alone? So these are what are called a priori beliefs. A belief that's justified by reason alone, mathematical beliefs, 2 plus 2 equals 4. He talks about 2 plus 3 equals 5. Um, and we also say things like all bachelors are males. So there are different things that we justify just by our reason. These things are called a priori beliefs. And neither a posteriori beliefs nor a priori beliefs, according to Descartes, pass the method of doubt test. So what's up with that? Well, there's a few things that he talks about that are um, reasons why we can question a posteriori beliefs. Again, these beliefs that are based on the senses, or even a priori beliefs, beliefs based on reason alone. One possibility is that we could be dreaming. So um, he talks about a concern about dreaming. Let's see if I can find him talking about dreaming. I'll leave that alone. I'm going to focus instead on this evil demon idea. Um, so he entertains the idea that God might be making us think something is false when it's, or making us think something's true when it's really false. But then he realizes in his mind that God isn't that way, that God's not really a deceiver. It would be a imperfection for God to be a deceiver. So then he thinks, well, what if it's not God who's good, but instead a God-like being who's bad? So, like an evil demon could be tricking us into thinking things are true when they're really not. So, the evil demon may be making us think the sky is blue when it's really not. It's a rainy day or it's cloudy. An evil demon may have given us false concepts such as two and plus and equals and four when really those things are not true. So he talks about how do I know that God, but then he later shifts it to evil demon. How do I know that God has not brought it about that I too go wrong every time I add two and three or count the sides of a square? or in some simple matter. Um, so then he supposes, well, um, I will suppose therefore that not God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely the delusions of dreams, which he has devised to ensnare my judgment. I shall consider myself as not having hands or eyes or flesh or blood or senses, but as falsely believing that I have all these things. I shall stubbornly and firmly persist in this meditation. So he's going to keep with this thought that there's this possibility of an evil demon that's making us think things are true when they're really not. He's going to focus on that thought here in this first meditation. Even if it is not in my power to know any truth, I shall at least do what is in my power, that is, resolutely guard against assenting to any falsehoods, so that the deceiver, however powerful and cunning he may be, will be unable to impose on me in the slightest degree. So he's going to really try hard to find out things that we can know in spite of the possibility of this evil demon. Now, he could have talked um, about other hypotheticals besides an evil demon. He does talk about dreaming. So he does talk about how it's hard to know the difference between dreaming and not dreaming. Obviously, you can pinch yourself, but you could just be dreaming of yourself pinching yourself. Um, there are a couple other possibilities that are more modern that people talk about. You could be a brain in a vat that's controlled by an evil scientist. So you might think that you have a body and arms and a life that you lead going into work and whatnot. But actually, you might just be a brain that's sort of in a vat that's controlled by an evil scientist. Modern people will sometimes talk about how um, it's possible that that's happening. So you really don't have a body, but you think you do. Um, the movie The Matrix, blew up back in, I forgot when, I guess the late 90s when it came out with Keanu Reeves. Remember how Neo is his character, and Neo finds himself in the Matrix, which is basically just a computer program. And when he's in the Matrix, he's thinking all these things are happening when they're actually not. It's just that his brain is hooked up to this computer program, thinking that he's doing kung fu and all these things when he's actually not. So, all these hypotheticals, the evil demon, the fact that you could be dreaming, you could be a brain in a vat, you could be in the matrix, are intended to get you to notice that you could be mistaken about, you can doubt things. A lot of things are going, you can doubt a lot of things that you think are going on might actually be false. So Descartes in the second meditation. So this is day two of his project, is trying to um, bring back some knowledge. So look at the way he starts. I'm going to read it to you. The way he starts the second meditation. He had a hard night's sleep, I'm sure. So serious are the doubts into which I've been thrown as a result of yesterday's meditation that I can neither put them out of my mind nor see any way of resolving them. It feels as if I have fallen unexpectedly into a deep whirlpool which tumbles me around so that I can neither stand on the bottom nor swim up to the top. Nevertheless, I will make an effort and once more attempt the same path which I started on yesterday. Anything which admits of the slightest doubt I will set aside, just as if I have found it to be wholly false, and I will proceed in this way until I recognize something certain, or if nothing else, until at least I recognize for certain that there's no certainty. So, like, he's disturbed by all the things that he questioned yesterday in the first meditation, today in the second meditation. he's going to make an effort to try to find some things that can't be doubted. All right. So let's continue. I'll read a little bit from you from the second passage, and then I'll go back to the slides, and we'll talk about this. I think, therefore, I am idea. Um, so later on in the second meditation, he says, "I've just said that I have no senses and no body." Because remember how the evil demon could make him think that he does when he really doesn't. Um, So this is the sticking point. What follows from this? Am I not so bound up with a body and with senses that I cannot exist without them? But I've convinced myself that there is absolutely nothing in the world, no sky, no earth, no minds, no bodies. Does it now follow that I too do not exist? So he's admitting the possibility that there's no body out there, there's no actual earth, that there's an evil demon making him think it's true when it's really not, but doesn't follow that he doesn't exist. And he says, no, actually, if I convinced myself of something, then I certainly existed. But then he's got this thought, but there's a deceiver of supreme power and cunning who's deliberately and constantly deceiving me. What about that? And then he says, well, in that case, I too undoubtedly exist. If he's deceiving me, and let him deceive me as much as he can, he will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I think that I am something. So, after considering everything very thoroughly, I must finally conclude that this proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived by my mind. Okay, so that's the famous I think, therefore I am idea, translated a little bit differently here. Um, but let's dig into this a little bit. So there are some beliefs that pass. He's basically saying if he has the belief, or I guess if think about yourself, if you have the belief, I am thinking, and then you start questioning that belief, you start applying the method of doubt test. Remember, the method of doubt test is the truth of the belief can't be doubted. So what if you start taking the test? So you have this belief, I'm thinking, and then you start questioning whether or not the belief passes the method of doubt test. You start doubting the belief. As soon as you start doubting the belief, you confirm that you're thinking, because a doubting or questioning being must be thinking. So if you have the belief, I'm thinking, and then you start questioning that, you start wondering, does it pass the method of doubt test? You must be thinking, because anything that's wondering or questioning or doubting must be thinking. Similarly, if you have this belief in your mind, I'm existing, and then you start questioning whether or not you're existing, you start thinking about, do I really exist? Does this belief pass a method of doubt test? You, at that point, confirm that you're existing, because a thinking being must be existing. And so this is the Descartes' famous argument that's in Latin called cogito ergo sum, or often translated as I think, therefore I am. So again, powerful passage there where he is trying hard, to save knowledge of some things. And so at this point, he believes that he's saved knowledge of I am thinking and I am existing. He does go on later to talk about what is this I in I am thinking. And he realizes and admits that he doesn't even know who I refers to, other than I am a thinking thing. So, he's not even sure when he says I am thinking, he's not even sure what I means, other than I means a thinking thing. So at this point, the only thing that you know in the passage, from this passage, is that as you're doing the method of doubt test, you know that a thinking thing is thinking. That's the most you can say. A thinking thing is thinking. So imagine right now if that's all you know. A thinking thing is thinking. You don't know that you have a body. You don't know that there's people around you. You just know that a thinking thing is thinking. Well, that's still something. That's still something that you know. And so let's go back to the skeptics' argument for skepticism. So they argue that for any subject or person or any proposition, like a sentence, number one, if S knows that proposition, then it's not possible for S to be mistaken in believing it. And Descartes goes along with premise one. But then premise two says it's possible that S is mistaken in believing that proposition. And then we get the conclusion that S doesn't know that proposition. So this is supposed to imply that what the skeptics believe, which is that we don't know anything, because it's always possible for whatever we believe that it's mistaken. And so Descartes questioning premise two, he thinks that I am thinking and I am existing actually are beliefs that we can't possibly be mistaken in believing. He also adds, and I haven't talked about this yet, so let's think about this a little bit, um, that first person psychological beliefs also pass the method of doubt test. So, a first person psychological belief would be, for instance, the belief that the sky seems to be blue. So, think about the difference between the sky seems to be blue and the sky is blue. Descartes says you can't be mistaken about the way things seem. So, the way things seem to you or appear to you, you can't be wrong that that's how things appear. You can be wrong about what things are actually happening outside of your mind, but you can't be wrong about the way things appear in your mind. So he does think that you can't be mistaken when you say, for instance, I feel hot. You feel hot. Nobody can question that you feel hot. You're feeling hot. That's how you're feeling. You can't question that you're feeling hot when you're feeling hot. Now, what you can question is that there's a fire. There may not be a fire because there could be an evil demon making you think there's a fire when it's really not. But an evil demon can't make you think you're feeling hot when you're not feeling hot. When you're feeling hot, you're feeling hot. So that's kind of how Descartes' thinking that first person psychological beliefs about the way things seem to you, those also pass the method of doubt test. You can't be mistaken about those. So at this point in Descartes' project, what he has established in his mind is that there are some things that we know. We know I'm thinking, we know I'm existing, and we know first person psychological beliefs about the way things seem. Later, we're going to talk about how he tries to argue for things that are outside of our minds. Notice that all he's argued that we know about at this point are things that are in our minds. The world outside of our minds, he hasn't yet established that we know anything about those things. And remember that part of his project is to establish that. He wants to save math and science that he believes in. He wants these things to count as knowledge. Um, and so next we're going to see how he tries to get to math and science. Um, but for now that we've gotten to the end of the second meditation, we've found that he does think that we still do have some knowledge that I think and I exist and about the way things seem. Those things pass the method of doubt test, according to Descartes. Thanks for the time. We'll talk again soon. Bye bye.